He was a billionaire CEO with the world at his feet, but his soul was stuck in a high school cafeteria 10 years ago. She was a nobody running a food truck, hiding her face behind a visor to escape a past that had broken her. He stood in her line for an hour just to see if she'd look up, but she treated him like any other stranger. It wasn't until he leaned in and whispered 4 words that her entire world stopped spinning. He didn't come for the sandwich, he came to find the girl who had saved his life before she lost her own. The humidity of a Nashville morning clung to the yellow and orange paint of Sunrise Bites, but inside the food truck, Natalie Quinn was moving in a different kind of heat. At 28, her life was a frantic rhythm of sizzling bacon, hissing espresso machines, and the constant, dull ache in her lower back. To the commuters on Pine Street, she was just the food truck girl, efficient, polite, and completely anonymous. Natalie wore that anonymity like a shield. She kept her visor low, her eyes focused on the grill, and her heart locked away in a box she hadn't opened in a decade. Nobody talks about this particular pain, the silent, grinding struggle of a person who has had to erase their own identity to survive. It's the relatable loneliness of being surrounded by hundreds of people every morning, yet knowing that if you vanished tomorrow, they'd only miss their breakfast wrap. Natalie had once been a straight-A student with dreams of culinary school in Paris, but a family tragedy and a mountain of debt had turned those dreams into grease and steam. She wasn't living, she was enduring, one $5 sandwich at a time. Caleb Walker stood at the very back of her line, his tailored navy coat looking out of place against the cracked sidewalk. He was a man whose name appeared in Forbes, a CEO who moved markets with a single tweet. But as he watched Natalie work, he didn't see a waitress. He saw the girl who had sat next to him in remedial math when he was a stuttering, bullied teenager. He saw the only person who had ever looked at him without judgment. He had spent years looking for her, and now that he was standing 5 feet away, she wouldn't even look him in the eye. As the line thinned, Caleb finally reached the window. He didn't order. He just watched her wipe her hands on her apron, his heart hammering against his ribs. Natalie was about to hand the last wrap to the person behind him, but Caleb reached out and touched the counter. He didn't want the food, he wanted to see if the girl who used to dream of Paris was still alive under that stained visor. "Sorry, we're out of the breakfast wraps," Natalie said, her voice flat and professional, her eyes already scanning the prep table for the lunch rush. She didn't look at his face. She hadn't looked at a customer's face in 3 years. Caleb felt a wave of heartbreak wash over him. The girl who used to laugh until she cried was gone, replaced by a woman who seemed to be made of stone. He leaned in closer, the scent of expensive cologne mixing with the smell of fried onions, and whispered, "Still remember me, Natalie?" The spatula in Natalie's hand hit the floor with a metallic clang. The world around her, the honking taxis, the chatter of the crowd, the hum of the generator, suddenly went silent. She looked up, and for the first time in 10 years, she saw him. Not the CEO, but the boy with the messy hair and the bruised ego she had shared her lunch with every day. The shock was a physical blow to her chest. Nobody talks about the pain of being found when you've worked so hard to stay lost. It's the terror of realizing that someone still remembers the version of you that you've tried to kill. "Caleb," she breathed, the name tasting like a life she no longer recognized. He smiled, a soft, sad expression that told her he saw the exhaustion in her eyes. "I've been looking for you for a long time," he said. But Natalie's defense mechanisms, honed by years of hardship, kicked back in. She looked at his luxury watch and his perfect suit, then at her own grease-stained sleeves. The gap between them wasn't just money, it was a lifetime of pain. She felt a sudden, sharp anger. Why was he here to remind her of everything she didn't have? "I have a business to run, Caleb. I don't have time for reunions," she snapped, her voice trembling. She tried to close the truck window, but Caleb did something that stopped her cold. He pulled a folded, yellowed napkin from his wallet, a napkin with a handwritten note she'd given him on graduation day. He hadn't just found her, he had been carrying a piece of her for 10 years. The napkin read, "Don't let them make you feel small, Caleb. You have a future. Don't forget me when you're famous." Natalie felt the tears pricking her eyes, a relatable heartbreak for a woman who had spent so long telling everyone else they had a future while she watched her own slip through her fingers. She realized that while she had been struggling to pay the rent and keep the truck running, Caleb had been using her words as an anchor. He wasn't there to gloat, he was there because he was still that lonely boy, and she was the only one who knew his real name. They met that evening at a quiet park bench, away from the neon lights and the judgment of the city. Natalie told him the truth, the silent struggle she had never shared with anyone. She spoke about her father's illness, the medical bills that swallowed her college fund, and the day she had to sell her mother's engagement ring just to buy the tires for the food truck. "I'm not the girl you remember, Caleb," she whispered, looking at her chapped, red hands. "That girl died a long time ago." Caleb took her hand, ignoring the grease under her nails. "She didn't die, Natalie. She's just tired." He told her about his own path, the loneliness of the boardroom. The people who only liked him for his balance sheet, and the hollow feeling of success without a soul. He offered her a deal. He wanted to invest in Sunrise Bites, to turn her truck into a chain of restaurants. But Natalie saw it as charity, and her pride was the only thing she had left. She felt a crushing weight of inadequacy. How could she be his equal when she was still worried about the price of eggs? "I don't want your money, Caleb. I want my life back, and you can't buy that," she said, standing up to leave. She thought she was protecting herself from more pain, but she didn't know that Caleb's company was about to face a crisis that only her street-smart engineering could solve. He didn't just need a wife, he was about to need a partner to save his empire. The crisis hit Sterling Global a week later, a logistics nightmare that threatened to shut down their entire supply chain. Caleb was a genius at finance, but he didn't understand the ground floor of the city. He found Natalie at 4 a.m., prep cooking in her truck. He didn't come with a proposal, he came with a problem. He laid out the maps and the delivery schedules on her small counter. "My experts are failing," he admitted. "They don't know the streets like you do. Help me, Natalie." Nobody talks about the healing power of being needed for your mind, not just your circumstances. For the first time in years, Natalie wasn't the girl in the truck, she was the strategist. She spent the next 48 hours mapping out a system that used her knowledge of the city's veins and arteries, the shortcuts, the timing, the human element that the algorithms had missed. She saved his company not with $1 billion, but with the grit she had learned while surviving on the edge. In the aftermath, the walls between them finally crumbled. Natalie realized that her struggle hadn't made her less than, it had made her formidable. And Caleb realized that his wealth was just a tool, the real treasure was the woman who wasn't afraid to get her hands dirty. They weren't a billionaire and a waitress, they were two survivors who had finally found a home in each other. Nobody talks about this pain, the belief that your hardships have made you unlovable or broken. We live in a society that values the polished version of success, making those of us in the silent struggle feel like we don't belong in the light. But Natalie's story is a reminder that your scars are actually your greatest credentials. The grit you develop while fighting for your life is the same strength that will eventually build your empire. Healing doesn't mean the past disappears, it means you stop letting the past define your worth. Don't be afraid to let someone find you, even if you're still covered in the grease of your struggle. The person who truly loves you won't just see where you are, they will remember where you're going. "I finally fixed the egg," Caleb joked on their wedding day, referring to the first meal she'd ever cooked for him. Natalie laughed, the sound finally reaching her eyes. "It only took you 10 years and $1 billion to realize I was right."